Hello friends, Miss Natalie here. Today I am showing you how I created a painting in Krita that focused on texture for the Unit 5 texture assignment. I started with a sketch. I didn't show you the sketch because I really wanted to focus on the tools I use to create texture. You can see I am creating this kind of thick paint texture, and I am using these RGBA brushes that are absolutely amazing in Krita. They have the shadows and the highlights like built in, so they really lay down like actual paint. It's like real painting. As someone who has done oil painting, I was really impressed. There are different textures that you can get. The different brushes I used were the thick dry, the thick paint, the impasto, and the impasto details. Impasto is just an Italian word for mixture. It's a technique where you use thick blobs of paint on your brush or your palette knife, and you can really see the texture of the brush strokes. If you think like Starry Night by Van Gogh, that is definitely impasto painting. That's that technique. Sometimes I also use the blender rake to kind of try to blend things together. So you can see I'm doing a still life with a couple of pears, and just using the different brushes. And here I am trying to blend some stuff together, but still maintain that texture. Now with this painting, I'm not focused on the implied texture of what the object would be, because pears are actually fairly smooth. I'm really interested in mirroring the texture of oil paint by using these different brushes. And I have to say, I worked on this particular pear for so long. I just feel like I was constantly working it again and again and again, and trying to make sure that I maintained some of that paint texture while I was working on it. And it kind of drove me a little crazy, so I moved on to the second pear. And just tried to lay in colors, thinking about value. I'm really thinking about all of the elements of art that we've covered so far: color, shape, in my sketch, line to a certain extent in my sketch, although line becomes much less important as I lay in the colors and try to create form. I am trying to create form through value and maintaining texture. Coming in with highlights. So you can see I've got my, it's like, whoa, that highlight is too much. Coming in, kind of reshaping that pear to make it look a little bit more, pear-shaped. I realized it was a little too top-heavy for an actual pear. I did have a reference image, and I kind of stopped looking at it for a while. And this is when I came back. I was like, oh, whoops, I better get it more like what the reference image looks like. That's why I say always use a reference image as much as you possibly can. So yeah, laying in, using that, you can really see the texture here. It almost looks fuzzy. I felt like I wish I could have used the brush and made it kind of bigger, but I didn't feel like I could get the precision of the shape of the pear if I was using a really big brush. I think if I was going to do this again, I would have blocked out, use my magic wand on the pear outline so that I wouldn't have to worry about going over the edges, and maybe even use that magic wand on maybe some different parts of the pear, the different shadows that I had already laid in order to make it so that I could use a larger brush and get a better texture from the brush. I'm going back in and adding some shadows now, doing those cast shadows and the stems and the the seeds. Really kind of, I'm in the finishing touches stages now, where I felt like my pears were good. I liked them, and now it's all about the shadow and the table and the wall behind the pears. Again, I'm using more of, I believe, the thick paint in this case, and kind of laying down the basic colors with the thick paint, and then coming back with the impasto and the impasto details to really get those textures. You can see that texture of that paint as I lay it down. I also, if I was going to do this again, I would have made the background a different layer. I was just thinking like a traditional artist here, and so I ended up kind of having to redo things. And then I'm finally, when I started doing the background, I realized, well, I tried to use a bigger brush to get like a stronger texture. And then I also realized, oh, you know what? I should do this in a separate layer because then I don't have to worry about painting over the pears. I can just paint in the background. And you can see I used a huge brush to get these kind of lovely, big, thick paint marks in the background and that paint texture. So this is all about paint texture. As I said again, it is not about the texture of the object. It is about the texture of the paint, and that is a-okay. So hopefully you will, here I am saving it. I hope that you have a good time playing around with textures and, and doing the little details, and you enjoy trying out those RGBA brushes. So go make some art.